Two different parts. So the first part will be with a PowerPoint presentation that I made.
Okay, I understood. Done. Okay.
And the second part will be movement-based. So that on that one we will keep moving.
Okay.
So I guess I will start. Oh, someone is having issues with connection. Yes. Sad. Sad, sad. Cool. And the girl that was trying to, Tatiana, she said she would be able to join. Oh, there you are. I see your face now. Cool. So welcome everyone. And I am so happy that you wanted to join for this first session. I call it the first episode because I like TV series, so why not call it an episode of the first season of Evolve. Yay! Please, at all times, let me know if you can hear me well, or if you don't hear me, you can just go with the Zoom sign language. And we are going to be exploring basically what it means to move, we as humans, to move in the flesh and in the skin of the other beings that exist in our world. We are going to focus mainly on animals because they are the ones that for me have the most interesting movement and actually the most relatable one. And my goal with this course is that through moving like them, you can find new connections to organisms that are around you that you maybe didn't ever notice before. So I hope that you can look at them through different eyes, relate to them a bit more, and not only to the animals themselves, but also to the environment in which they and also us live. So that is my big goal. And oh yes, I apologize that my sound is really bad. I have really bad headphones and I did not manage to find any better ones. So if I sound like I'm being muffled by a pillow underwater, I'm sorry.
Maybe without headphones?
It's because my computer doesn't have a microphone. So all is wrong for now. But actually, I will try to switch this headphones for now. I can use the ones with a wire, and maybe it will be a bit better. Let's try. Can you hear me a bit better? Nope, not yet. Can you hear me a bit better?
Oh, yes.
Nice. So I will reserve the underwater pillow talk to when we are moving. Those are the wireless ones. So I'll just give a quick explanation of why I'm focusing on this, on the movement of animals. First of all, my name is Kenzie. You can see it written there. And I'm a dancer. I've been dancing several dance styles for some years since I was little. But I focus mainly on a dance no longer called Tribal Fusion Belly Dance. It's now called Something Fusion Belly Dance. It's a very interesting fusion of many different traditional dance styles from all over the world. And I also have been studying some more urban dance styles, mainly with popping and hip hop, but also I've been studying a bit of contemporary techniques. So I will use a bit of all of this during the work that we will develop in Evolve. And the other part, the one that comes from biology, is because my educational background in university is actually biology. And my master's was in something called evolutionary biology. So this is the study of how organisms change over time, over sometimes millions and millions of years, and why they are as they are right now. So for example, maybe you've heard that we humans descend from a common ancestor of chimpanzees and orangutans and gorillas, but we are not like them. So they study the processes of how they turned out to be as they are right now, and also where they will go from now on. And basically, this is what we call evolution. And now we will go into my beautiful PowerPoint. I'm so proud of it, it's so pretty. And here it is. So evolution happens in many ways. And there's one process that maybe we've all heard about called natural selection. So it's a concept that was created and spread out by Darwin, and he suggests that the strongest will be the ones to survive. But what this means is that the ones that are more adapted to the place where they live will be the ones that have more children, and they will have more children, and eventually the whole species will become more like them, which were the ones that lived there better. And if anytime you have questions, please go ahead. And there are another way of natural selection to act on animals is also called sexual selection, which is sometimes mainly females. We have the power to choose how our babies will be. And it doesn't mean that they will be the strongest and the fittest of them all. It may just mean that we prefer long tails over smaller tails, for example, like the peacocks, or we prefer blue over red, and then we will end up getting together with the blue animal instead of a red animal, and our babies will be blue, and that will also spread. So don't forget, we also have the power to change the course of our species. We mostly have the power. We're the ones that carry the babies. So, another way of looking at evolution is not only towards the animal and the individuals, but also on the genes that they have. So maybe you know that we have something called DNA, which carries the information of what we are and how we are, which can have also something called mutations. So you have the DNA, which is like a code. It's like a language that translates into proteins that make us up. And sometimes there's mutations. And those mutations can also affect the species. If that mutation is really good for the environment where it is, it will also spread and change the species as they are. That is called the genetic drift. And then you can also have the gene flow, which is when several populations of different species start getting together, or also populations of the same species that are different, they look different, they get together, and they also create a new way for the species to be. So there's many ways to change the course of how organisms are. And animals are the ones that you can focus more on because they are the ones that are closest to us. But we don't only have animals in our world, and if you look around, you will see many more of them. And you will also see a very big diversity of environments. So because the environment can shape the evolution of the organisms, it will affect its diversity. But the environment is also made up of organisms. If you think of the environment forest, there will be plants in the shape of trees there. So they will also affect the diversity of the environment in return. So this is a never-ending cycle in which both affect each other. All good so far? Yes? Yeah. So there's a couple of definitions that we have to settle. And one of them is organism. So what indeed is an organism? And that includes animals and plants and many more that we'll check right afterwards. And basically an organism is something that is alive in opposition to, for example, a rock. A rock is not alive because it doesn't fulfill these requirements that you can see right now. And a lot of them include having processes going on inside your body, like in your cells or in your metabolism, but they also include the ability to reproduce, and rocks cannot reproduce, but cats can reproduce. And also the heredity, which is here that you can see in red, is one that is very important for evolution, because if you don't have babies, you do not evolve. You need to be able to have many, many, many generations so that your species can evolve and change. And I will now present to you the diversity of organisms that exist in our world in their most broad grouping of organisms. And these are called kingdoms. And there are many definitions of how many kingdoms there are. This is the latest one and includes 7 kingdoms. And you can see here, for example, the animals, which you recognize, but also the plants. Probably you've also seen some plants in your life, but there's some more. So let's go very quickly through them. And we will also go quickly through them during our course, even though we focus more on the animals, which is the one in the bottom. So the bacteria, starting with those, are the ones that are closest to how life probably was when life started in the world. And they're very small, single-celled organisms. And we will talk about them in episode 2, so next week. And then you have the archaebacteria. They used to be called bacteria because they are very similar, but it turns out that they are a bit closer to our cells than the cells of bacteria. So they became a separate kingdom. And what happens with these ones is that their DNA is not enclosed in a nucleus. In our cells, we have all our DNA close together in a little bag, and they have the DNA all spread out in the cell. So they're called prokaryotes, and we are eukaryotes. And that's what separates them from us. One of the main things. Then we have the third kingdom, which is chromista, which is already a eukaryote, but they can now have 1 or more cells in the same organism. So we also have many, many cells. We are not made of one. We have trillions of cells, and they can also have a lot of them. And they have chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is that it's a protein that plants have that allows them to have photosynthesis. And that means that they can create their own food. Examples of chromists are actually very close to us. Algae are chromists. They are not plants. Some of the algae, or most algae that you see, are chromists, as well as a lot of pathogens, so organisms that create disease. For example, the pathogen of malaria, which is Plasmodium, or the pathogen called toxoplasm that affects pregnant women and comes from cats. That's also a chromist, and it's very widespread. And then you have protozoa, which this one is very interesting to note, and it's very interesting to understand what it means, a protozoa, from looking at its name. So its name comes from Greek, and proto means previous, and zoa means animal. So these are very small organisms. These only have 1 cell, and they are very similar to the cells that we have as animals. And they also feed off of organic matter, just like we do. They are just smaller, so they feed off of much smaller organic matter. Then we have fungi, or fungi. I'm not sure how to say this actually. Fungi. And they are a group of very, very important organisms because they are the main decomposers of our world. So if it wasn't for them, most dead things would remain there. But they go there and they eat that organic matter, and that means that they make a huge surface to us, all of us in the world. And they include not just mushrooms, but also yeasts, which make beer, for example, and molds. Molds are the little dark green substance that shows up on bread when you don't eat it on time. Then we go for plants, and plants now are mostly multicellular, and they are the ones that do the photosynthesis that I was talking about before. They basically transform solar energy, so the light coming from the sun, they transform it into chemical energy, which means food. They can literally feed off of the sun. And they also incorporate CO2 and they expel O2, oxygen. Incorporate carbon dioxide, expel oxygen that we breathe. So they are incredibly important to maintain the equilibrium of the world, and to stop global warming, which is also caused by an increase of CO2. So that's why plants are important to stay around, stick around, and that we keep planting them. And then we have, in the end, animals. We are animals, and that means that we are eukaryotes. Like I said, our DNA is tightly packed together. We consume organic matter, like fruit or meat. That's all organic matter coming from other organisms. We breathe oxygen. We move around. It's a very important characteristic of animals and that we will focus on. And they also reproduce sexually, which means that their babies are produced in a different way from yeasts, which just produce clones of each other. And this is exactly the group of organisms that we will focus on for most of the course. So after episode 3, it's all about the animals. How are you doing? All good? Yes? Any questions? Cool. So the focus of today's episode is not only on the organisms, but mostly on their environment. And it's very important now to define what is environment. What does this word mean? We hear it a lot also because of climate change. And environment is basically, oops, I stopped seeing you. Ah, there you are. It's basically all the living and non-living things that are occurring around us in the world. And they work as units. A unit means that it is a discrete set of things, a group of things, both biological and non-biological. So that includes the soil, for example, which is non-biological, all the sand and rock. Then it includes the vegetation, which is biological, and the organisms. The atmosphere, the gases and air are non-biological. And then it includes all the natural things that are happening there, which are the interactions between all of these. And this, then a specific type of environment, when you are referring, for example, to a desert or a forest in which a type of species lives, for example, when you refer to a species habitat, is you are defining and giving all the characteristics of the environment where you find that animal. And you basically describe these physical and biological features. It includes, as I told you before, also the animals that exist around the animal, and not only the plants and the soil. And also giving a bit of attention to this temperature and light. We'll also focus a bit on that. And as you may realize, when you look at an environment, when you study it, the temperature is pretty important. It's the difference, for example, between a desert and the Arctic from the Arctic from the north. You will most likely think of temperature first. The desert is very hot, the Arctic is very cold. So this is already a very important characteristic in defining this habitat. And this is exactly what we will focus on today. So welcome to episode 1, habitats. And the PowerPoint. Whoops, how do I stop this? Yeah. All right, how are you doing after this small theoretical introduction? Good. Are you ready to start moving a little bit? Cool. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And one more thing that we need to think about during this series is that we have only a 40-minute time for the meetings. So what I'll suggest is that I will end the meeting and we'll all be back by clicking the exact same link, and we'll have the 40 minutes for moving. Does that sound okay? Can we try it? Okay, I will see you in 2 minutes or less. Well, 30 seconds.